Yo, what's up? What's good? I did not think that I was gonna come out and make a video like this, but here I am in a full face reveal. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
Why are you running?
I actually don't know what to say because it's like my first time showing my face on camera, but welcome if you're new, and to the people that have been watching me for quite a while now. I just want to say, hey, what's good? And welcome to the channel. I mean, I basically wasn't gonna make a face reveal video, but to be honest, I mean, after the 100 subscriber mark, I wanted to originally put out a series of interviews with a lot of CHH artists, but unfortunately, a lot of people just either don't have the time. I know a lot of you guys requested a lot of names, but there's a lot of artists that are busy as it's festival season. A lot of artists are busy rolling out their albums. Some people replied back, but they just, I don't know, left me on scene. So it is what it is, but you know, I do have an interview coming up. It's just unfortunately the audio for that interview basically got lost, and to said artist who did the interview, if by any chance you're watching this right now, I just want to say I am completely and utterly sorry, you know, because it's just one of those things in tech and video editing that you can't really fix. And I know that was a really good interview and that was a really good conversation, but it's just one of those things, and I'm sorry. Anyways, that interview will be coming out soon. Unfortunately, I will have to set up another time to meet to re-record the interview, but that interview will be coming up. So for anyone asking about, you know, the 100 subscriber special, it will still be coming up. But in the meantime, I thought, why not throw in a video of me? Or more specifically, I guess a face reveal, just because I wanted to do one for the longest time, but I was gonna put it off for a while. But since the other video is gonna take some time to put together, I thought, why not come out with a video of not only just talking about, I guess, a little bit more of my personal life, but also, I guess, expand a little bit more. I typically, CHH videos are all I really make, but from time to time, I've had thoughts about expanding my channel a little bit, you know, not diverting from like the main formula, which is what you guys are subscribed here for, which is just CHH news, CHH videos, upcoming artists, all that stuff, but also throwing in, I guess, a little bit of my personality on the channel and just talking about just faith related subjects and everything like that, and just sharing, I guess, a part of me with you guys that are watching right now. Now, this is a video that I've been wanting to make for some time now, but unfortunately, it took me a while to get this out just because for the longest time, I was looking for a mic that worked for this type of video setup that I was making, but unfortunately, I couldn't find one, so I'm just gonna put it out right there, right now. Just a shameless check. I taped fake mic. That doesn't matter right now. That does not matter right now. What matters is what I'm going to be talking about for this video, and that is the Christian album that honestly saved, or I guess also restored, my faith in Christ. And the album that I'm going to use to just explain part of my testimony and what I was going through. And when I mean a testimony, I'm not talking about a testimony of how I came to know Christ and just how I got saved and all that. I'm more so specifically focusing on a time and testimony in my life when God basically came through for me when I was ready to just put down Christianity and just walk away from everything, just walk away from everything I'd learned up to that point and just chase the world. You know, the best way people would like to put it is a deconstruction phase. I know it's a term a lot of Christians for some reason don't like hearing, you know, in the Christian space, but I do believe people should talk about, you know, their stories about deconstruction, just because I think at some point when you're young and you're growing in the faith, there are just a lot of promising things you experience when you're young as a believer, when you're just, you know, naive and everything, you believe in a little bit and you're not really out there experiencing the real world. And then when you do get into the real world, a lot of those beliefs get put to the test, and so you get to a certain point where you're just questioning everything you believe in and just wondering if it's real or if this is just harmful. And the album that I'm going to use to just explain part of my testimony is going to be Paris Caris's Polaroid album. And it's an album, 5 years down the line, that gets brought up pretty much every year around its anniversary. And its anniversary just passed. And so I basically wanted to make a video just revolving around just its anniversary and just how, on online CHH pages and comment sections and community posts, people talk about just the album and the impact that it's had and everything like that. And so this video is kind of going to be centered around it just because it is a very special album, not only to me, but to a lot of people. And so I just wanted to center just my story around it. Though for the sake of time, I won't go through every single song or anything like that, as I want to mainly talk about just my story and testimony. And also as well, I won't go into every detail with this story just because there's so many avenues that I can go into, but honestly, I just want to keep it just simple and straightforward. So yeah. Now the significance of this album, the reason why it's special to a lot of people is because I believe now looking back, Polaroid was an example of, one of, you could say, many albums that were coming up at the time that were slowly breaking, the mold in CHH with how music had to be made. Just because, a lot of people, if you've been in CHH for a while, the back and forths between critics, fans, the artists, with how Christian music, or specifically Christian rap, should be made. Just because there is a huge gap in just creative differences and just how an album should be made from a Christian perspective and everything like that. The significance of Polaroid, the reason why it sticks to even to this day, is just the fact Polaroid did one thing which a lot of what Christian music wasn't doing really at the time, which was give a real story. And I don't mean to, that's not to say that Christian music wasn't real, wasn't raw, it wasn't transparent, but at the time, Christian music was following a formula, for the most part, of keeping things Christ-centered without really digging too much into people's just personal vulnerabilities and just things we all as just people go through. And as a result, I think it just created this disconnect with just the listener and listeners, even outside of Christian music, who are looking to connect with the artist and their story and just find some relatability on a human level. And finding an album that just gives a full rounded story, which is essentially what albums are all about. You're basically you're telling a story, but a story has curves, it has ups and it has downs. And when you're in a space where, you're just afraid to talk about your true feelings about something, it could still be a good album and still go on a good trajectory. But eventually, there's no curves, there's no valleys, there's no highs, there's no lows. And that's not to say that, Christian music didn't have that at the time. It certainly did. But there was definitely a limit and lack of consistency in terms of what you could and couldn't talk about, and just a limited range for the type of subject and content for the type of audience you were trying to reach and relate to. And this album, which mainly talks about Paris's experiences being in a toxic relationship and everything like that, it wasn't really a common thing that was seen at the time in CHH, just talking about exes and growing from a past relationship. But it was definitely something that was relatable to a lot of people, whether if it was just relating to the same situations he went through, or just in general, just because the album covered a lot of other areas as well outside of relationships, in my opinion. But yeah, the significance of the album, the reason why it sticks to this day is just because it was ahead of its time a little bit, and just not being afraid to go outside of the box and push the boundaries with what you could talk about just in Christian music, Christian rap, and everything like that. And that is not to say as well that there weren't other artists doing that as well. But his album was definitely one of the few selections of just music that was beginning to change the trajectory of CHH and where it was going at the time. There were other artists as well, and we could talk about that for another time. But I just wanted to just give a preface to just the significance of why I'm talking about this album and why people just bring it up every year. In short, what I'm trying to say is that his album was definitely a little bit more outside of the boundaries of what church culture was traditionally used to seeing, especially just within Christian music. So this video is not an album review, it is not anything of that nature, but simply, like I said, it's going to be revolving around my story. And so I'm not going to go through every song in the album by order or anything. This is just going to be by complete random order. And also as well, some songs that I bring up, I might bring up songs that, generally, that I really liked, that were pretty good in my opinion, and just go into detail more into what Paris was trying to implicate or just talk about in his songs. Or while other songs, I just might talk about more of the relevancy of how a certain song really stuck out to me during, certain parts in what I was going through at the time of my life. Because I think one thing that music does really well is it triggers a lot of nostalgic memories for pretty much the average listener. And it asks the question of, what part of my life was I when I was listening to this song? How did the song make me feel? What time of my life was I in when I was listening to this song? And why do I still revisit this song to this day? All these questions pretty much factor into figuring out why, the significance of a song just means so much to us, and why a God-given feature like nostalgia is very valuable to humans in general. So I hope you guys enjoy the story, as I'm not only bringing you guys into my world, but the vision and story of Paris Cariz's Polaroid album. So let's jump right into the album that saved my faith.
Now, you are about to enter the stage of sorrow, happiness, and repentance. Enjoy.
Yeah, I've been wiping up, splashing on her.
Now, I love one of his songs on the album called Splash. I just love the feel for the song and just what I was going through at the time in 2017, where this story basically takes place. Now, at the time, I was around 20 or 21, and I was a hustler. I was just hustling every day. Working two jobs, one which was my first job, which was at a local YMCA, and another one was at another job which my buddy got me. It wasn't the best job for sure, definitely one of the worst jobs I've ever worked, but it was at a McDonald's downtown in our city, and it had a pretty bad reputation, especially overnight. But at the time, I was working pretty much those two jobs, and I also had dropped out for a semester just to save some money, focus on my goals, to pretty much just reroute where I was going career-wise, and retake some college classes, get my grades up, figure out which university program I wanted to apply to. Also, I was trying to chase my hoop dreams of just making a college team and just playing college ball at the time. So I was pretty focused back then, but overall, it was a busy period in my life. Between working a job I really loved, just working with kids, working within the community, versus a job I really hated at the time, where I'd be working overnight, where I would deal with a lot of just drunk college students, or just a lot of homeless people that were either mentally ill or had addiction problems, and all sorts of stuff like that, really. And so it made for an interesting couple of months at the time. But overall, I thought everything, was just within my grasp, within my control, I guess. And the plan wasn't to work these jobs that very long anyways. And so everything at that time, I thought seemed fine.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta let them know, man. You ain't with all the games.
I think the next song, Fake Friends, does a really good job at just painting what I was going through for the next while in my life. And, the song in itself just talks about seeing people for who they really are, and just the realities of, what happens when you deal with people who truly don't have the best intentions in your life. People who will backstab you, people who just don't appear to say who they really are. And, on this song, Paris especially does a really good job at evoking his emotions and bringing out his passion, and just with what he was going through. I love the hook.
Fake friends, all these fake friends know what's up. People talking never gave nothing. They don't know just where I came from. Faith in Jesus, I just made some. Felt the pressure, had to cut it off. Fake friends, let me X those. Now I'm free, got me waving on them. Boy, I'm color coded, these my best clothes.
especially on the last part of the song, just because on the last part of the hook, you can feel and hear, I guess, just a huge difference in his emotional tone and pitch into the hook and what he's saying and everything like that. You can literally feel a jaded sense of frustration when he's talking about just dealing with fake friends and just, talking about putting his faith in Jesus and everything like that. And it's definitely one of the better features on the album, which I would say is why people relate to it so much. And which is why earlier when I was talking about just the lack of depth within CHH when it came to storytelling, Paris pretty much checked off those boxes. And a few weeks ago, or probably a month or two ago, I know a discussion was brought up around the Twitter thread with Derek Minor talking about why CHH music, I guess, doesn't excel as far as people think it should. And, he was pretty honest about it, and he just talked about just the lack of transparency with CHH. And again, that's not saying that everything back in the day was just fake and just had nothing relating to anyone, because of course we all grew up on CHH music. Like we all grew up on Lecrae, Derek Minor, Andy Mineo, or just at least heard them at some point, Sho Baraka, just everybody else. Everybody had a story to tell. However, at the time, there just seemed to be some kind of rift and disconnect with how to go about approaching topics that weren't normally talked about in church culture. And this is where, to me, Paris's album just comes in and is almost like this antithesis to what the current state and expectation of CHH was at that time, and almost stands out on its own, like an anti-social album that's just a little bit more darker and moodier and just deviates from just the traditional, consumer-friendly Christian music that's comfortable to just play around Christian culture, whether if it's just Christian radio in a youth group setting or just anything like that. And so instead of making an album or song just talking about a marriage or a relationship and stuffing just the whole song or album with just scripture quotes and good feeling theology, what if instead of that was replaced with talking about a relationship that ultimately didn't work out and just the pain and suffering and anguish we're still dealing with? How do you cope with that when it feels like you just don't have the answers? And not only that, but dealing with trying to overcome, a spirit of cynicism and just bitterness. And how do you cope with all that? And how do you overthrow all of those questions that we as believers go through? Just because there are certain things that we might not want to open up about people. And I think Paris's attempt at just opening himself up to that and just going for a more bold approach, just explaining all of this into one album, definitely just opened a lot of eyes to a lot of people, and definitely bridged together what CHH was missing a lot at that time. And so back to my story, at that time, from about around April until about the rest of the year, I pretty much just hit a string of just terrible situation after terrible situation, and just a string of just down bad luck. And it started about when at the time, like I said, I was saving for school. I was making a good amount of money. It was my first time working, full-time, almost overtime. And so I guess I must have felt a sense of security with the money I was making, because I was buying just clothes, a new bike. I had locked myself into a new cell phone plan, and I just wasn't being wise as a naive 20-year-old with my money. But at the time, I thought, well, since I'm making this much money, therefore I can afford these things. And long story short, within the short span of a month, I believe, a cell phone plan that I locked myself in for about 2 or 3 years pretty much got robbed at my work locker. A bunch of people came in and just vandalized the staff room. They checked every locker and they threw my bag around, and everything was gone. I had lost everything. A few weeks later, I had just bought an expensive bike, and that bike, I had put, a whole brand new lock on it and everything. I went to the same gym I was working out at, and one night I dropped by for not even 30 to 40 minutes. And within that time frame, my bike was cut and just gone. So not only had I lost my phone, wallet, and everything else, But now coming back to this gym again, someone stole a brand new bike within not even the span of 30 to 40 minutes. To top it off too, the same night I got my bike stolen, I received a random text from someone who I had no idea, who they were, and they told me they had my bike, and I don't know if they were trolling me, but I tried to ask them who they were and all that stuff, but they just never replied back. That was just a whole messed up situation with the chain of events that were going on at the time, and looking back, I don't know how this person got my number. I don't know, but that whole situation in itself was messed up. I had lost a brand new phone. I had lost a brand new expensive bike. I lost pretty much everything, all my IDs, everything in my wallet. And as an add-on, because I was working overnight at McDonald's at the time, I wasn't used to, it was my first time working overnight just in general, so my body wasn't used to staying up all night and then trying to stay awake during the day. So I would feel pretty sleepless during the day, and so it would cause me to forget a lot of things and just build a bad habit of just forgetting, the smallest little inconvenience. A bus pass that might have slipped out of my pocket while I'm just sitting on the bus, or just maybe my only pair of work clothes that might have slipped out of my backpack that I forgot to zip up, another lost wallet. No matter what valuable possession I was bringing along with me, it just didn't seem to matter because it just seemed like I was just losing things left and right. But that was the least of my worries at the time, because then around May, I believe, there was a huge work situation in which involved two people getting falsely accused of something that never actually happened, and so they got let go on the spot and fired. The rest of the staff just trying to figure out and get to the bottom of what was going on, but ultimately resulted in pretty much most of us just either getting fired or just quitting on the spot after a former employer who we just thought we knew well and trusted and just were always around. They just decided to pretty much take note and document every single text, group chat, post within just our work group, and she decided to report and document everything and send it to management. And pretty much the whole time management was tracking every single thing we said, and so that pretty much resulted in a lot of people's firing, a lot of people such as myself just walking out, a lot of people eventually just leaving right after just because it just didn't feel right working there anymore. And so not only was I upset that a job of 5 years was coming to an end, but I was very spiteful and I guess resentful because of how I ended up leaving that job, because when I had quit, it triggered a whole wave of rumors about myself and my coworkers. And so from that point, anytime I would just get a simple workout in and I was talking to people, I would hear a lot of things that weren't even true about what had happened during that whole ordeal and situation. And so it left a bitter taste in my mouth just to know that misinformation and rumors were just circulating around, and there was literally nothing you could really do about it. You couldn't really do much about it. At that time, I felt really just not only just upset at everything that had gone on, but just sad that a job of 5 years, a job that I just spent my teenage years comfortably growing up in, had suddenly come to an end. And now I was left with just, my other job at McDonald's, which wasn't the greatest at the time. As for that whole summer, I just completely distanced myself. I felt just lost for most of that time, and I didn't really know where my life was going, just because imagine just being in a peaceful and comfortable situation, and then somebody just comes in and just takes that away from you. They just rob you dry, and they leave a bitter taste in your mouth by not only taking everything away from you, but also lying on your name and saying things that aren't even true about you or your friends that were involved in that situation. And so because of it, you're walking around with a lot of people having a lot of things to say about the situation that aren't even true, and you have to deal with it. Obviously, we all say life's not fair, but you're upset at the world. You're mad, you're angry, and you don't really want to associate really with anyone. And so for that whole summer, all I remember was just working overnight, just staying away from the counters, from just the crackheads, the drug addicts, and everything like that. Just because overall working there, you didn't really know what was going on over the counter. And also when I was bringing up that, I was just mad at the world and just where my life was going, a lot of that at the time was attributed to working at that restaurant, just because walking into an overnight shift of seeing constant fights, breaking up fights, having, I'm pretty sure for anyone who's worked fast food, having people come up to you and just, talk down on you for working a fast food job, constantly having strangers walk in and just throw and whip burgers at your face. And, you can't really do anything just because you don't know if they're under the influence of some substance, and you don't know, what they're going to do. From time, just working the cash and then watching someone all the way down at the end of the hall just get jumped, stabbed. And then on the flip side of that, just not trusting even your own coworkers, or just not even trusting your own management, just because of the way that place was just ran and everything like that. It opened my eyes at the time as a 20-year-old to, I guess, what the real work environment is like and what it's like working for just a corrupt management at the time. So seeing people being asked to stay an extra 30-40 minutes and then finding out that their time was punched out so they could get extra free work out of them, or just like I mentioned previously about how we didn't have security, finding out that they basically just want to save money, and so they'd rather use the city's police resources to basically handle all of the nonsense and foolishness that was going around at the time. And you're just stuck there being forced to de-escalate the situation just because there's no nearby security and you pretty much have to wait until the cops show up. After a while, all of those things just caused me to develop a mistrust and just a short-tempered fuse, whether if it was lashing out at someone who I felt was just trying to slight me, or just arguing and cussing back at someone who was just trying to pick a fight, or someone just threatening me. And in high school, I was never really that. I was a lot more friendly, a lot more open, and it took a lot out of me to just get me to a point of anger and just wanting to fight someone. Looking back, working there definitely opened my eyes to the world as a 20-year-old, and just realizing that it's not all cut out to be what it is, and that everything you're taught about the order in which things work, when you're earlier on in your 20s, and just how life works, was just completely skewed and thrown out. And in short, for most of that time, I just felt like I was just mad at the world. Looking back, it just seemed like people were looking down on me in any way possible, and so I would always be in a bad mood and just angry all the time. And so for a while, as much as possible, I would just stay away from the counter just to not get myself into those situations, and just focus on getting through the next shift. I would pretty much work overnight, sleep all day, and then just wake up to another dark night ahead. And so it really seemed like it was mostly just darkness covering my life at the time. And so I would distance myself away from just people generally at work, my church family, and just my small group at the time. I didn't really, talk to them or keep in touch with them. And also as well, I had felt already pretty distanced from my peers and friends who were already graduating from their programs, as, like I said, at the time, I took a semester off to focus on basketball and working and saving money and all these other things. And so it really seemed like I was hitting just not really a dead end, but I guess like just a dead space in my life where I just didn't know where to go at all during this time. And so during that time as well, and I'm pretty sure, people are going to ask, why would you even work there if this is such a dangerous, area, and you're in a negative environment where all these things are happening and all of these things. And to that, to be honest, at the time, my main thing was just having financial stability, which the job did give me, just because nobody wants to work overnight there really. So you could grab as many hours as you wanted. But I did not want to go from full-time hours to just scrambling to find another full-time job quickly before I was going back to school. So I didn't want to scramble and struggle for that. So I just thought in that short period, I just got to work through this. And then from there, I can transition to school, transition to finding a new job, and then just quit altogether. And make no mistake, I'm not trying to say that none of these events were of no fault of my own, as I did choose myself to tough it out for that short time period. But obviously looking back, it definitely wasn't the best decision to make at that time. And the plan ideally was going to be to just wait till the end of the summer and just find a new job, which I eventually did, but I mean, that job only lasted so long, and I guess a lot of the lashing out, cussing, threatening, aggression, and just overall short developed temper and everything that I picked up from basically seeped into this new workplace. Me and the new manager, we did not get along. So long story short, I pretty much got fired within like 2 weeks. And so I was pretty much stuck back at that McDonald's because I was still there. I was just working less hours until I could just quit and move on and transition in fully into school. But unfortunately, I got fired before I could even see my first paycheck. So I was back at this McDonald's. And so ultimately, it seemed like I was in a situation that was just ultimately out of my hands. And so for the first time in my life, I felt like it was the first time I was losing something that I was familiar with, comfortable with, and just attached to.